My mother has a favorite sentence, and she likes to remind me of it roughly once a week. Giving birth to me, she says, was the worst decision she ever made in her life. She usually leads with it before she's even finished, taking her shoes off at the door, which tells you everything you need to know about how these visits tend to go. This particular morning was her third visit of the month, which was impressive, considering the month wasn't even close to over. I sat on the edge of my bed, shoulders slumped, staring at a spot on the floor that had suddenly become very interesting, while she stood over me, listing out, once again, everything my older brother had accomplished by the time he was my age. He'd started his own company before he turned 20. He'd stopped taking a single cent from our parents the day he enrolled in university. He apparently did all of this while also being taller, more charming, and, I'm fairly sure this part was implied rather than said out loud, a better son in every conceivable way. I want to be clear that I did try. I put together my own startup a year ago, under fairly different circumstances than she probably remembers, and poured every yuan of savings I had into it. 6 months in, it collapsed under a string of losses I never quite managed to recover from. My father's reaction to that particular failure was to slap me across the face in a moment I still haven't fully processed. My brother's reaction was to remind me, once again, exactly why he was the one everyone pointed to when they talked about our family. Here's the thing nobody tells you about failure, though it doesn't get remembered kindly. Success gets celebrated. Failure just becomes material people use against you later, which is exactly what was happening in my bedroom at 8 in the morning, months after the fact, like the wound needed reopening on a schedule. You used to be obedient, at least, she said, glancing at the small collection of medals still sitting on my shelf, archery, piano, a handful of academic competitions I'd been pushed into as a kid. That obedience got you results. I used to play piano. I don't have the energy for it anymore. As for archery, I don't get a lot of chances these days to demonstrate how precisely I could put an arrow through someone's eye, though in that particular moment the idea had a certain appeal. Kyle, her voice sharpened. When exactly are you going to stop being so irresponsible? Just give me a date, and I'll stop wasting my time coming here. I looked up and met her eyes, the same piercing blue I apparently inherited and did nothing useful with, and said, "Give it 50 years, though I'm not sure you'll still be around to see it." That earned me a look like she was seriously considering slapping the taste out of my mouth, so I grabbed my phone and my bag before she could follow through on it. "I'm running late. Lock the door on your way out," I told her, and then I was out the front door and moving fast enough that I couldn't hear whatever she shouted after me. I want it on record that I'm not actually as nonchalant about my life as she thinks I am. I worry about it constantly. It's just that, unlike my brother, my parents' obvious favorite in every sense of the word, I don't have a single thing about me that qualifies as exceptional. Every one of those medals on my shelf existed because they pushed me into competing, not because I ever wanted to. And the whole reason I moved out on my own in the first place was to stop living my life as a slightly worse copy of his. I'd told myself I would never ask my parents for money again after I moved out. That lasted about as long as my savings did. These days, my monthly allowance comes specifically from my brother, who never misses an opportunity to hand it over with a reminder attached about exactly how different the two of us turned out to be. She left without another word after that, and I sat there for a while longer than I needed to, listening to the front door click shut and then, A few seconds later, lock from the outside. She'd actually done it out of habit more than kindness, I assumed. I've noticed that about disappointment. It doesn't announce itself once and then leave you alone. It circles back on a schedule, dressed up as concern, and somehow every visit manages to find a slightly new angle to come at you from. This time it had been the medals. Last time it had been my apartment's location, too far from a good neighborhood, apparently a reflection of my choices rather than my budget. I'd stopped trying to guess what the next one would be. I walked to campus that morning instead of taking the bus, partly because my bus card had been stolen a few weeks back, and partly because paying for a new one felt like a bigger ask than my dignity could currently absorb. Arthur's Academic Union isn't a particularly prestigious school, but it's enough. If I actually graduate, it should be enough to get me a job that lets me eat 3 meals a day without thinking too hard about it. That was the plan, anyway, on the good days. I've never been able to decide whether the walk to campus was the best or the worst part of my day. Best because it was the only 20 minutes where nobody expected anything from me at all. No comparisons, no disappointed looks, no notifications I was afraid to check. Worst, because it gave me exactly enough time to think, and thinking, for me, rarely led anywhere good. That particular morning, I mostly thought about numbers. Bank balance. Days left before rent. The precise dollar amount my brother's transfer covered, and the precise amount of humiliation that came bundled with it, free of charge. Campus was its usual noisy self by the time I got there, clusters of students laughing, trading gossip, existing in that easy, unbothered way I never quite figured out how to do myself. I'm not a total outcast. People wave. People smile. I'm just the kind of person everyone knows, and nobody specifically invites anywhere, which is its own particular flavor of loneliness that's hard to explain to someone who's never lived inside it. I was looking for one specific person as I made my way through the hallway, my girlfriend, Amanda, who I fully expected to be late, because she'd been late meeting me for the better part of 6 months now. I checked my phone on the way to my seat, a message I'd sent her the night before, asking if we could meet at the station at 7. Sent at 9. Still unread. This had become a pattern I'd started noticing, without wanting to admit I was noticing it. Replies that never came, calls that got disconnected the second they rang, half-explained excuses about her mother needing her. I told myself it was nothing. I'd been telling myself that for a while. Amanda and I had been together for 2 years by that point, and for most of it, things had actually been good. She was the one who'd approached me first, back when I was nobody in particular, which, to be fair, I still am, and somehow that hadn't scared her off. We were friends for a few weeks before she confessed to me, and I said yes without much hesitation, because I liked her, and because being wanted by someone for the first time in my life did something to me that I probably don't need to explain. For a while, she was the best thing that had happened to me. She was the one who pushed me to actually try the startup in the first place, who believed in it before I did, who acted like a mother, a friend, and a girlfriend all at once, depending on what the day called for. Then the business collapsed, and my father hit me, and my brother said what he always says, and somewhere in the wreckage of that, right around the same 6-month mark I kept losing count of, Amanda started drifting, leaving early, skipping our nights together, walking out of class without a goodbye, and texting an excuse an hour later. I tried everything I could think of to fix it. I kept texting even when she stopped replying. I left notes for her, 2 months ago, I'd planned something big for her birthday, something I'd actually saved up for, and she never showed. Her excuse was that her aunt had fallen down a flight of stairs and needed her right away. I remembered distinctly a conversation from early in our relationship where she'd told me she only had one aunt and that aunt lived in a different country entirely. I hadn't said anything about it at the time. I'd just filed it away, the way you file away small cracks before the wall actually comes down. Looking back, I think some part of me had already known for weeks before that morning. You don't spend 2 years with someone without learning the specific shape of their honesty, and Amanda's had started sounding different. A half beat too rehearsed, a little too eager to end the conversation before it could go anywhere real. I just hadn't let myself finish the thought. There's a strange kind of comfort in unfinished thoughts. As long as you don't finish them, you get to keep living in the version of your life where they aren't true yet. Around me, the usual pre-class chatter was in full swing, most of it centered on the one guy every girl on this campus seemed collectively obsessed with Ethan Lockhart, the kind of effortlessly charming golden boy who made every other man on campus, myself included, functionally invisible by comparison. I sat down, phone still in hand, staring at that unread message, while the professor started asking everyone to get their notes out for the day. I wasn't really listening. My head was somewhere else entirely. And then, a little late, 2 people came rushing through the classroom door together. One of them was Ethan. The other one was Amanda. They looked at each other for exactly the kind of beat too long to be nothing. Our eyes met across the room for maybe 2 seconds before I looked away first, because I already knew, with a kind of sick, immediate clarity, exactly what I was looking at. I didn't need her to explain the 6 months of silence anymore, or the aunt who apparently existed in 2 places at once. I had my answer sitting right there in the doorway. I spent the rest of that class period taking exactly 0 notes, staring at a board I couldn't have described 5 seconds after looking away from it. The professor eventually noticed. I caught her glancing at me once, twice, in a way that felt more curious than annoyed, though I didn't have the mental bandwidth to think about it. When the bell finally rang, she reminded the class about an upcoming research trip and told us, half joking, not to fake a dead relative just to get out of it. I almost laughed. It felt darkly appropriate, given the excuse currently sitting 3 rows over. Everyone started packing up around me. I stayed in my seat and waited, because I already knew what I needed to do, and I wasn't going to let another day pass pretending otherwise. I watched Ethan glance back, not at me, at the group of girls behind me, Amanda's group, and 2 of them peeled off to join him. One stayed behind and walked over to where I was sitting. Amanda sat down beside me with the same ocean blue eyes and soft black hair I used to think I could look at for hours. She apologized for missing my text, blamed a dentist appointment, and a missed train. I didn't say anything. She seemed to expect an outburst from me. I'd been getting sharper with people lately, though mostly the sharpness landed on myself rather than anyone else. After a pause, she said she needed to go finish an assignment at the library with the others, and that she'd call me that night. "You don't need to," I said before she could get up. I gathered my books while she stood there, confused. "You don't need to call me anymore, Amanda." She blinked. I watched the tension creep across her face in real time. "What do you mean, Kyle?" I looked straight at her and said it plainly, because 2 years deserved at least that much honesty. "I mean, we're breaking up. So don't call me again." Something odd happened just before that exchange, though it took me a while afterward to realize how strange it actually was. Earlier, on my way out of the lecture hall, the same professor who'd been glancing at me all period had stopped me and asked, almost too casually, if I was doing all right. Teachers ask that kind of question, without meaning much by it most of the time. But there was something in how she said it, like she already suspected the answer wasn't going to be yes, and wanted to hear it confirmed anyway. I told her I was fine. She held my gaze a beat longer than the answer really called for before letting me go. I filed it away with everything else I wasn't ready to think about yet. I didn't stick around for whatever Amanda said next. I don't fully remember walking home that evening, only that by the time I got there, I sat down on the floor of my apartment with my back against the bed and did the kind of brutally honest inventory of my life I'd been avoiding for months. 20 years old. A failed startup behind me. A father who'd hit me once already, and a brother who never let a monthly transfer go by without a comment attached. A mother who visited 3 times a month specifically to remind me what a disappointment I was. And now, officially, no girlfriend, having just confirmed in the most humiliating way possible that she'd already left months before she got around to admitting it out loud. The only thing left standing, barely, was my streaming channel, a small, mostly ignored corner of the internet, where a few dozen regulars showed up to watch me talk into a camera about nothing in particular. It wasn't much. It had never been much. But it was the one thing I'd started entirely on my own terms, without anyone pushing me into it, and somewhere in the wreckage of that day, I decided it was time to let that go too. Cut my losses across the board. Stop pretending any of it was going anywhere. I sat in front of that laptop for a long time before I actually pressed the button to go live. It's a strange thing, quitting something nobody was really paying attention to in the first place. There's no ceremony to it. No one throws you a going-away party for a hobby with 20 regular viewers. I almost talked myself out of even announcing it, just letting the channel go dark and assuming nobody would notice for a month or two. But some stubborn, wounded part of me wanted to say it out loud, to at least one audience, even a small one, before I let it go the way I'd let everything else go that year. I opened my laptop that night, turned on the camera, and started what I fully intended to be my last stream. I don't remember exactly what I said. Something honest, probably too honest, about being tired. Tired of failing quietly, tired of being compared to a brother who never had to try this hard for anything, tired of finding out in a lecture hall that the person I trusted most had already left months before she officially left. I told the 20 or so people watching that this was it. Last stream. Thanks for showing up when nobody else really did. The reaction wasn't what I expected. My chat, usually a slow trickle of lukewarm comments, exploded, people typing over each other, telling me not to quit, asking what happened, a few of them clearly upset in a way that caught me off guard, given how small and quiet this channel had always been. And then, in the middle of all that noise, one of my regulars, someone who'd been watching for months, always polite, always a little strange in a way I'd never quite been able to place, sent a gift. Not a normal one. Not the kind of small digital token people usually send. The second it landed, something shifted, immediately and physically, like the temperature in the room had changed, even though nothing around me had actually moved. What followed is difficult to explain cleanly, because at the time, it didn't feel explainable at all. I understood all at once and with a certainty I couldn't argue with, that the world was not what I'd spent 20 years assuming it was. Somewhere underneath the version of reality I'd grown up in, there was another one, older, stranger, populated by things with names like nightmare and shadow and ghoul and curse, entities that weren't metaphors or horror movie, set dressing, but simply real, and had apparently been real the entire time, quietly coexisting with the mundane life I thought I'd been failing at. And that gift, that one impossible gift from a regular viewer I'd never thought twice about, had just made me a part of it. I felt something settle into place inside me that I can only describe as a kind of blessing, though it didn't come with fireworks or a booming voice from the heavens. It was quieter than that, more like a switch being flipped somewhere I didn't know I had. Along with it came something even stranger, a system, invisible but unmistakably present, that seemed to exist for the sole purpose of rewarding me. Not for winning anything, not for accomplishing some grand task, just for existing, continuing to exist, the way I'd been doing badly at for 20 straight years. It took me longer than I'd like to admit to piece together the next part. Some of the regular viewers on my stream, the ones I'd always assumed were just people, ordinary bored strangers clicking into a small, unremarkable channel, were not people at all. They were something closer to gods. They'd been watching me, apparently, for longer than I knew, in the exact same understated way they'd been sending small gifts and typing encouraging comments in my chat, never once giving away what they actually were. I sat there in my apartment that night, laptop still open, stream long since ended, trying to process the fact that the single worst day of my life, public humiliation, a shattered relationship confirmed dead on arrival, a mother's voice still ringing in my ears about what a disappointment I was, had somehow also become the night everything about my life quietly, irreversibly changed. Rock bottom, it turned out, had a trapdoor in it I never knew was there. For a moment I just sat there, letting the silence of my apartment settle back in around me, half expecting the feeling to fade the way adrenaline usually does once the initial shock wears off. It didn't fade. If anything, it sharpened. A low, steady hum somewhere behind my ribs that hadn't been there an hour earlier, like a second heartbeat had quietly moved in without asking permission. I didn't understand yet what any of this actually meant. I didn't know what an SSS rank was, or why that particular classification kept surfacing in my head like something I'd always known but never had a reason to access before. I didn't know what my first skill would look like, or how a system built around simply existing was supposed to function differently from every hero fantasy story I'd half read as a teenager, where power always came from grinding, from winning, from being chosen for some grand destiny I clearly wasn't. All I knew was that something in my chest felt lighter than it had in months, in a way that had nothing to do with the breakup, or the business, or my father's hand, or my brother's voice. What I did know, sitting there in the dark with my chat log still glowing on the screen, replies from strangers who might not have been strangers at all, was that the version of me who'd walked home that afternoon, convinced his life was quietly ending, that version of me didn't exist anymore. Whatever I was now, I hadn't earned it. I hadn't trained for it, competed for it, been pushed into it by anyone. For the first time in longer than I could remember, something had simply been given to me, unconditionally, for no better reason than the fact that I'd kept showing up, week after week, to a stream almost nobody watched. I sat with that thought for a long time. 20 years of being told, in one way or another, that I was the disappointing one, the son who didn't measure up. The boyfriend who wasn't enough to keep. The founder whose company didn't survive its first year. And somewhere in the middle of the worst single day I could remember having, something in the universe had apparently decided otherwise. I didn't trust it yet. I want to be honest about that. Part of me was waiting for the other shoe to drop, for this to turn out to be some cruel cosmic joke at the expense of a guy who'd already had a rough enough day without a supernatural twist added on top. But another part of me, smaller and quieter, had started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, I'd been measuring myself by the wrong scale this entire time. I closed my laptop that night without any real idea what tomorrow was going to look like. My mother would probably still think I was a disappointment. My brother would probably still remind me of the gap between us the next time he transferred my allowance. Amanda and Ethan would probably still be exactly what I now knew they'd already become, whether either of them said it out loud or not. None of that had changed. But somewhere underneath all of it, quietly, invisibly, something entirely new had just started keeping score, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one losing.